And I'm going to welcome now Joe Fortunato. He is our film expert. He's going to take us to film school this week. Just a personal note, Joe, one of the cool things when I first met you is I found out that your grandma was my mom's best friend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
on Brown Street at Mary's Garden Center?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Your mom and my mom were very good friends. I remember when I was a little girl, they used to pal around, so. Anyway.
My mom or my grandma?
Your grandma.
Yeah, okay.
Your grandma and my mother. So, we have that connection. So, this morning now we're going to talk about what?
Today we're talking about Saturday Night Fever from 1977, directed by John Badham. And it was released in December 16th, 1977. This movie made $237 million on a $2 million budget. So it was very profitable. It started as a very low-budget project. No one really thought much about it. It was based on an article in New York Magazine, and the producer, Robert Stigwood, was looking for a project for John Travolta. He had auditioned him for some other things that wasn't right for, and he knew he was going to be a star. And at this point, he was already starring on Welcome Back, Kotter. So he was a big star on television, but not in the movies yet. So they found this project for him, and so there was no real casting besides him in terms of the lead of Tony Monero. But it made him a star. And one thing that people tend to forget about this film is that it was a very gritty 70s film. In hindsight, all these decades later, we kind of tend to think about the music and the Bee Gees and disco and kind of this lighthearted 70s kitsch. But this was a very gritty movie about essentially teenagers or young adults that lived in very lower middle class neighborhoods. They were they had no future, they had no prospects. It was very dark. And I think people tend to forget that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have any way out of the neighborhood. Their lives were pretty drab, and so they would go out to the disco, and then they could become somebody else.
Exactly, and that was how Tony Monero, the character, expressed himself. He was the king of the disco, and that's where he found his worth, because he wasn't finding it at home. He really never got any praise or love from his family. He was always compared to his brother, who was a priest, and that was a big deal in a Catholic family. He was working at a paint store. He didn't really have much of a future, but when he went to the disco on those nights, he was king of the world, king of the neighborhood, and that's kind of the story that people gravitated to and related to.
It's so synonymous with it's so synonymous with the disco era. Here's the question: chicken or egg? Did the movie come first, and then the disco phenomenon, come out of that, or was the disco phenomenon already, in full swing, and this came out and mirrored that?
Well, a little bit of both, actually, because disco had come out before that, and it was kind of actually on the downside. It was kind of dying out, and then this movie came, and the Bee Gees soundtrack in particular reinvigorated disco, and it kicked it off for another year or two at least. In fact, the Bee Gees the soundtrack album was the highest selling album of all time until Michael Jackson's Thriller came around and knocked it off the pedestal.
Excellent. And it also kicked off a lot of disco fashion too, didn't it? With those polyester shirts and the bell bottoms and.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, the iconic white suit that John Travolta wore in the film. First of all, he had to have a couple of suits because he would sweat so much. He would sweat through the suit, and they would have to give him a new suit while the other one dried off for different takes. The suit was originally he wanted it to be black, but the costume designers kind of convinced him that says, hey, you know what? If it's black, you're not going to show off on screen as much. In fact, your dance partner is probably going to steal the scene. And so they changed it to white so that he would, be the focus of the scene. The suit itself, the original suit, was purchased at auction by film critic Jeanne Destro, who called Saturday Night Fever his favorite movie. So it was a little bit of fun trivia.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe Fortunato, taking us to film school once again on 93.5 FM, 1590 WAKR. Time for